if you're like me and you were struggling to learn the fretboard based on all the videos that we have available online, here's a little bit of a tip that might help you because it helped me. I'm currently working through bassbuzz, or Josh Fosgreen's Beginner to Badass course, which is a pretty solid course for anyone who's a bit overwhelmed by the information that is out there. One of the coolest things that he's taught is the octave shapes or octave modes. And an interesting thing about that is he teaches some music theory, but not a lot, because I know music theory is freaky to a lot of people, including myself, especially when it gets to super heavy depth music theory. But for me, it's been good because it's allowed me to kind of start connecting some of the dots between the different scales, the shapes. It's been useful for ear training and that sort of thing. But another tip within kind of understanding the octave shapes is utilizing your snark tuner, or another tuner that I've got right here. This one's super old. It's bleached. It used to be blue, but it's bleached. It's an old one. It takes a watch battery. There are ones now, you can get them on Amazon for like 20 bucks. Guitar Center, Sweetwater, anything like that. I'm sure they even sell them at Target or Walmart. You can probably go in and find one if they have a music section. But they're super cheap. They're chromatic tuners, so you have all 12 notes that it can pick up. So that's E to E if you're playing E chromatic. But an interesting thing is starting with C major. So you have your C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And the important thing there is that it's all natural notes. There's no sharps, there's no flats. But the interesting thing there is that you can begin learning the fretboard a little bit easier by just knowing that by shifting your hand slightly between the second and fourth strings, you have just an octave higher when you get from second to fourth. So for example, within C major, you have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C again, but it's an octave. So now you know that there's a C on the third fret of the A string. Then you know that there's a C on the fifth fret of the fourth string. And this applies everywhere. But a beautiful thing about that is you can also apply it to G major, for example, just a string up. So you have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, but then you're back to G. And I don't know why that's been so helpful to me, but knowing those octave shapes has helped me learn the fretboard significantly easier. Because I think one of the things that you find, and there's a lot of good stuff out there, but a difficult thing for me is that it's so much information packed into one lesson that it's difficult to decipher through what's going on. And through the bassbuzz stuff, I'm not sure if anybody is using that or is familiar with it. It's a huge channel, so you've probably at least seen it. It's probably come up in your recommendations, but he walks through in these bite-sized chunks. So he'll kind of open up with a lesson on something that he's wanting to teach you. Let's just say it's scales. And then he'll go into a slow exercise, medium, and fast exercise. You can kind of go at your own pacing. There's a bunch of loops and different things that he includes with it as well. It's only 200 bucks, but it's been super helpful for me. So if you're struggling, that might be useful. But from that, I've been able to kind of get down all the strings. You know, you have your E, A, D, G, obviously, which is simple enough. But then memorizing all of the notes as you get up the fretboard can be difficult. And for me, it's been kind of helpful to look at the strings as if they're kind of, you know, they're the thickest to the thinnest, of course. But to think about the notes as ascending, getting higher pitch this way, and then almost coming back and going up slightly higher pitches as you get up each of the strings. And with that, for whatever reason, that visual was able to kind of unlock things for me. Now granted, I'm still learning. I don't know every single note by heart, just by thinking about it, but I'm working through it. And one of the cool things about that, just through Josh Fosgreen's stuff, as well as that kind of little mental exercise and playing around on the fretboard, is you start to make those little connections. Like specifically, for example, you can think about B and C on each string, or E and F, for example. You start to connect the dots of those being the same tones in different areas. So for example, you have E, F here, but you also have E, F here. And this is on the A string. And then on the D string, you have E and F here. It's the same exact note. It seems silly. It's so simple. And I feel like plenty of people are going to, find that obvious. But for whatever reason, I wasn't making that connection until taking the course and then just kind of fiddling around based on what he was saying. And the same thing applies for other notes as well. So on the E string, you've got B and C, for example. But if you jump to the A string, second, third fret, it's the same thing. It's the same 12 notes. It's just different placements. And I think the nice thing about a bass guitar, rather than a 6-string electric, is that the 4 strings, they're all in fourths. They're all tuned in fourths. So you don't have, a high D and a high G string, or high B and a high E string, rather, which kind of shift things up and confuse you. This, it's a little bit easier to know octave, octave, and then you shift down to the A and the G strings. Octave, octave. Makes things a lot easier. And you pair that with a snark tuner, or any chromatic tuner for that matter, and you quickly start to be able to visualize things. So you can go E, F, it's immediate feedback, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and then you hit the octave, E. You can do that with each string. And then you just start to make those connections to where your brain will kind of find natural notes, for example, like you can go E, F, G, A, B, C, D, and E, the octave. And through that kind of unlocked a different portion of this for me, and maybe it will for you as well, of understanding the different keys. Like, for example, I would get so confused when someone would be like, oh, it's in the key of G major. Just like, okay, what the heck does that mean? I could find a G, for example, but major, I was like, oh, well, it's just a scale. It's just G, that's your root, and then the scale, major scale. Makes things a lot easier. And then if you think about, first, second, fourth, that used to confuse me as well. All it is climbing the scale. So if it's a G major scale or a C major scale, for example, if we go C major, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, rather, and then the octave. You can do it with G major as well. Basically every single note up the fretboard, so long as you can kind of connect the dots and make that association with, well, if you skip a string, essentially if you go from A to D and you jump up 2 frets, it's the same note. And the same thing applies from A to G. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but for whatever reason, that connection helped me. And I felt like I was struggling with it for a really long time. And now is going to be the cool part of this, and hopefully the same for you, is that you can unlock the whole fretboard. You can start to make those connections. Scales kind of become fun because you start to ear train. You can start to improvise a little bit, even if it sounds goofy and you're missing notes and whatever. But for me, one, working through Josh Fosgreen's program was super helpful. And I think it's a great value for what it is. $200 and you unlock everything. That includes tracks that you can download and sheet music and things like that. And using a chromatic tuner, like a snark tuner. Just because it's like I said, immediate feedback, E, F. It's not just for tuning the bass. And maybe that's super simple. Maybe that's stupid. But it's something I feel like it is worth sharing because it was such a stupid, simple thing for me that I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it before. And hopefully that's helpful. I don't know. But I'll continue to do some stuff like this. Little things that I come across as I'm trying to learn this instrument. And hopefully it's helpful. And hopefully I can alleviate some of the pitfalls that I've experienced, because I've spent a lot of time with bass, with piano, with, 6-string electrics, fiddling around, hours noodling, which is just a complete waste of time. I think it's great to noodle, try to find covers and things like that, but I've spent so much time doing that just because, I get so overwhelmed with the amount of information that's on YouTube. And then there are all these different courses you can buy. Everybody says this one's great or that one's great. This one's the best. This one's, the best. You never know what to sift through. And fortunately for me, I decided to grab a bass one day and I loved it much more than a 6-string electric, which was interesting because I started kind of fiddling around with one of those when I was a junior in high school. And I thought that was the cool thing to do. Thought I would love it. I thought bass was silly. And then I got one not too long ago and I actually prefer it. And that's kind of been a little bit of a blessing in disguise finding that out now, because I'm actually able to understand the fretboard, music theory to a certain extent, a little bit better. I've gotten further than I ever had playing an electric, a 6-string electric. So, and one of the cool things about that too is even if you're not a bass player, those rules will apply to the first 4 strings on your 6-string. And hopefully that'll make some connections, and then you can figure out the B and E strings later. But for now, I think this will suffice. But again, subscribe or follow, whatever, for more. I've got an Instagram, Twitter, some other things. I'll be fiddling around and posting things. The goal is to eventually post some of my own stuff on here as well once I actually have a better idea of this instrument and can understand things better. But anyways, appreciate anyone watching. Hopefully you got something out of this. It's certainly been helpful for me to kind of make that connection. So as I get further through the course, the bassbuzz course, I'll probably post some more stuff that I've learned, and encourage you guys to go over there and subscribe to him if you haven't already, and buy his course if you're looking to kind of accelerate your learning, because you could spend 10 or 20 years fiddling around and never get anywhere. But if you find the right structure, you can accelerate your playing in just a few months, which is pretty remarkable. So he's got quite a few testimonies on there. But yeah, for now, thanks again, anyone watching. And see you guys again soon.